Live from the SABC's Auckland Park studios, welcome to this week's midweek edition of the Watchdog. My name is William Vogo, and on the show this evening, another Metro mayor bites the dust as the ANC recalls its Buffalo City deployee. Wenzeni is the question the party's leadership is going to answer here on the program.
We are very shocked and very extremely disappointed with this whole thing, controversy around Dr. Makwarela.
And as the political crisis continues in the capital city over a mayor who should never have been a mayor, we ask who slept on the job and didn't do what they ought to have done. The court orders Nehawu to behave as the union's nationwide strike is marred by incidents of violence and intimidation. All this and more coming up in tonight's episode of The Watchdog, which starts right now. Some patients were turned away from the Charlotte Maxeke Academic Hospital in Johannesburg this morning. This as the nationwide Nehawu strike entered its third day. The industrial action has affected health services at facilities across the country.
Patients bearing the brunt at Charlotte Maxeke Academic Hospital. This as a number of patients at the hospital were discharged as the strike action gains momentum. Workers affiliated to Labour Union Nehawu entered day 3 of their indefinite strike action. One patient who was due to undergo a knee operation was among those sent home. Reason being that doctors and nurses are not available due to the nationwide strike action.
We came early, but most of our staff is locked outside. There's a protest. Nurses can't come in, doctors can't come in, theatre staff can't come in, so your surgeries will have to just be on hold. Then we're going to have to take you guys home. Then like, home now? Yeah, now you have to go home, because even if we keep you in the wards, there won't be any nurses to come and take care of you here. Like the food, what are you going to eat? The kitchen staff is not here.
At the same time, Nehawu disputed these allegations, maintaining that their protests are peaceful. The unions say no one was prevented from entering or leaving the hospital.
We have not blocked entrances to the hospital. Members of Nehawu, joined by many other workers, because as we continue with the day, we are starting to see other union, even leaders of other union joining us now. They decided when they arrived in the morning that they are not going to go inside.
On the other hand, workers say with the high cost of living, they can no longer survive on their current salaries. They demand that government hears their cry and revise its offer. Some of their demands include a 10% salary increase, 2,500 Rand housing allowance, and improved medical aid benefits.
We want 10% because everything is too high. The cost of living is too high, and we have ama bonds. We university, and then we can't afford by this 3%.
Workers say they will not accept government's offer less than what they demand, 10%. They say the stay away will continue until government meets their demands. Nothando Makutilela, SABC News, Johannesburg.
In the Free State, the High Court in Bloemfontein has ordered striking Nehawu members not to intimidate those who are not on strike. The Provincial Health Department approached the court on an urgent basis after some staff members were intimidated and assaulted.
Workers affiliated to Nehawu continue with their protest. At Pilonomi Hospital, patients were returned home while staff members who work in ICU were intimidated and stopped working. Computers at the admin were also damaged. The health department in the province obtained an interdict against striking members of Nehawu. The order also prohibits members on strike from barricading main entrances of hospitals.
In Pilonomi, we experienced people that were beaten up. I was called by somebody at around 5 to 7 in the evening who was saying, here's a person who's just been beaten up. I'm walking out of the hospital. And, you know, there were sporadic reports about people being beaten up. And then we had to file a case against intimidation, because as much as there's a right of striking, there's a right of people also to life. There's also a right to people to work if they want to work.
Workers also demonstrated their protest at the National and Universitas hospitals. They demand a 10% wage increase, house allowance and bursaries for their children. Workers also complain about overtime payments and vacancies that are not filled.
The department in Free State is a disaster. I said we are not budging. Our strike is indefinite. We have problems in the province, e.g. shortage of staff, tools of trade, uniforms. Our members don't have uniforms. And this is an indefinite strike until employer met our demands.
3 Nehawu affiliated members who were arrested for public violence were released on bail. Police continue to monitor the situation. Aphumelele Mdlalane, SABC News, Bloemfontein.
Well, to discuss this matter, I'm joined in studio by health activist Dr. Kgosi Letlape. I also have on the line Nehawu's Deputy General Secretary, December Mavuso. Good evening to both of you, and thank you so much for your time.
Good evening to you. And good evening.
Let me start with you, December, if I may. The court today asking you, your members, not to intimidate those who may cross the picket line.
No, thank you very much for your and good evening to the listeners. Yes, indeed, there was a court interdict from Free State that called on the union not to intimidate the recipient of service delivery in our hospitals. And the leadership of the union immediately in the morning in Free State communicated that widely to all members in the health institutions.
Well, it wasn't only in the Free State. You may have seen some of the visuals we played, which were from Nelson Mandela Bay, where members of your union walked into one of the public hospitals, intimidated those who were working, disrupted things, turned desks and chairs upside down. I mean, surely that is not something that should be, that you two, as the leaders of the union, should accept.
Yeah, look, we just concluded a meeting with our provincial structures, just taking stock of what has happened. Clearly, the union in all provinces never gave any instruction for destruction of property or to intimidate people. But to the extent that we've seen some of the unfortunate incidents taking place, we regret that as a union. And this meeting, as we concluded this evening, we've agreed that the leadership of the union across province and regions will descend to the workplaces tomorrow to engage with workers. But we all equally feel that the employer needs to take responsibility here because Since 2007 strikes, 2010, and so on, we've been calling for the conclusion of minimum service level agreements in health institutions, because once you declare a sector essential services, the law requires that you have minimum service level agreements, so that during activities like these, you can manage, you have a system of managing what should happen there. When we realized as a union this week that most of the health institutions are taken to the streets, we immediately directed all our shop stewards and leaders to engage institutional management to at least agree on the ratios in terms of the minimum service level that can be rendered in the institution. We even developed, a template or spreadsheet to be used to negotiate that. Some were receptive to that. Some were very dismissive. But the blame really on this matter must be taken by the National Department of Health, by DPSA. It's about time that this matter is put to rest, because it's a requirement of the law. We also think that the Essential Service Commission is failing the public here, is failing all of us, because that is the mandate of the Essential Service Commission. Their mandate does not stop at declaring a sector essential service, but it proceeds to make sure that you now agree on the minimum service level agreement, or what you call the skeleton staff, if you like.
But perhaps dismissive as perhaps the management of hospitals, of the department may be, but fact of the matter though is that the old, the sick and the infirm should still or need to be attended to, however legitimate your demands and concerns may be. And I'm sure you'd also agree that such incidents do also take away from your fight and your struggle.
No, we don't deny that the recipient of the service must be taken care of. That we agree. We've never. In fact, just a few weeks ago, if you remember, we had launched a public service delivery campaign at Charlotte Maxeke Hospital as a union and in Nelson Mandela Academic Hospital. At the center of that campaign is the plight of the people who rely on the public service delivery. The things that we are raising, for instance, is we are here to service you, but the infrastructure is a problem. There's high vacancy rates. We're unable to service you in the speed in which we're supposed to. That's why there are long queues, whether it's in health, whether it's in home affairs, whether it's SASA offices and so on. So we were doing that because we wanted to place the needs of the poor and social issues at the top of the agenda. Of course, incidents like this, they do, create a bit of a problem in terms of the issues that we are raising. But at the end of the day, those issues need to be addressed. We need to come to the table and deal with whatever issues that give rise to the protest actions that workers are embarked on.
Dr. Letlape, first, your thoughts first on what we've witnessed, what we've seen playing itself out on our television screens over the past 3 days of this strike.
My first thought is that as a South African, I'm ashamed of what we do for the majority of the people. And all of us that are privileged should be ashamed. This is something untenable. This is a basic violation of fundamental human rights of vulnerable people. And we got to go back to, we shouldn't be surprised that this type of things occur. When you have a system where people are given a 3% hike in salaries, when we know the cost of living is high, rates and taxes, electricity, fuel, transport, and you give people 3%, you're then condemning those that work to you to slave wages. And that is problematic. And I think we need to have a government that begins to look at its own heart. in terms of these issues. But one of the things that we've always lamented is the absence of the minimum service level agreement. Because that would commit both the employer and the employees to protecting the rights of the vulnerable. But that agreement needs to be in place so that there's legal responsibility from both sides in terms of being responsible to the vulnerable, ensuring that emergency services can occur, women that need to deliver can still deliver safely, anybody that is acutely ill would still be serviced, anybody that has other issues, people that pass on in our facilities, families should have access so that they could conclude their issues. And the absence of a minimum service level agreement is one of the key drivers of these frustrations and things spilling out. Because if it is there, the unions would act responsibly, knowing what are the minimum services that need to be available, and we all work together in the healthcare space to ensure that those essential services continue. And I think it's about time that some of these issues, and maybe we need to go to the courts to mandate the government to have these agreements in place.
As an outsider, so to speak, looking in, where do you think lies the problem? Is it for lack of trying on the part of the government? Is it failure to lead? Is it a devil-may-care attitude? What do you think is responsible for this?
Well, at the core, it's the fact that in health, apartheid is alive and well. It's not dead. We don't depend on those hospitals for our services. The different cabinet members, the judges, the CEOs, the privileged South Africans, members, executives of the unions. We don't use that for our own care. We go elsewhere. So we do not feel the pain. That's why we can let that infrastructure crumble. You know, I spare thought to the members of the unions that work in these facilities, my fellow professionals that work in this facility, some of whom have, taken chances to try and go through the barricades to go and do their job and help their patients. And we need to begin to spare a thought for them. So it's a multiple of factors. We let that infrastructure crumble because we don't go there for our own healthcare. When you look at the staff complement, the number of people that are on duty for the number of patients that are seen, the number of duty that are on staff for the number of beds that that hospital has, it's all negligence. Why does it persist? Because it's for the poor. We used to have divisions of white and black. It's now rich and poor. And the fault lines are much, much more severe than before. And I think we all have to take collective responsibility as citizens, as union leaders, as the state, as employers, that you can't sit in a public service bargaining chamber and say people are essential, but you do not appreciate them. How does it work? How are you declared an essential worker, but they don't go out of their way to ensure that you're comfortable? I mean, in civilized communities, when you have issues like this and you're essential workers, you'll be transported at state expense to go and provide the minimum services that have been agreed upon.
Well, the president waxed lyrical during COVID about how these doctors and nurses and general workers, everyone pulled through, like really carried this nation through what was perhaps one of the most difficult times, during the life of this democracy. Do you think they were only paying lip service to that?
Well, I wouldn't say they were paying lip service to that, but they live in a different world. Human beings are driven by self-interest. So whether it's me or you, we're driven by self-interest. Now, if you separate the self-interest of the privileged from the ones of the poor, you get a divided society, and gross disparities. The only way the poor can be lifted, they can be lifted by those that have. But if they are in a separate system, there's no mechanism for them to be lifted. You know, it's like asking people to lift themselves up by their bootstraps when they have no boots. As Barack Obama said, it can't happen. And until we have one South Africa, one health system, and everybody matters, this is just the beginning. When you look at the fact that the systems, I've worked in this health system since I was a young man. You know, I came out of medical school when I was 22. I've been in this system for 41 years. And what you've seen is continued underfunding of the public healthcare system. And sadly, the new people were given a lemon that they never understood. And they were separated because we go elsewhere for our healthcare. So we don't feel the pain. There's no skin in the game for us. Human beings are fairly simple creatures. If there's no self-interest, they will not lift a finger. And South Africans are no different. And as long as we have separate systems, it'll never work. As long as we have the current structural organizations. I mean, people have been saying, where is the Minister of Health? Where's the public service minister? We are public servants. We're employed by public service. Where are they? What are the conditions of service? The gross underfunding of the health system is painful. I mean, I see my colleagues sitting on broken chairs. Plumbing that doesn't work. I mean, let's get real. And I think the issue of access for vulnerable people, for patients, is something that I hope the union will strongly address. But South Africa must wake up to the issues that are being raised by the unions, that have been raised by the professionals that work in that system, and we need to begin to sort those issues out. We need to have a more effective budgeting system. If we say we need money for human resources, it should be dedicated for human resources. It can't just be thrown at the province and it can use it to try and fill the gaps of what it owes from last year. We need line budgeting. We need commitment to revitalize our public health service. So that, like when I grew up, if you were really sick, you went to the public healthcare system. The first heart transplant was done in a public hospital in this country. And there's absolutely no reason why we cannot go back to those standards. But as long as we have separateness, where the leaders and the privileged go elsewhere, we will never solve this problem. If we're not united, if there's no solidarity, we'll never fix health.
Mr. Mavuso, have you been able to put a finger on the reasons why, for this failure to reach a service level agreement?
Look, the reason is simple. In fact, when I think way back 2016, even before that, just after the essential services or the bargaining council has concluded the designation of the sectors as essential service, and the process was supposed to proceed from there. The government made it clear to all of us that there will be no minimum service level agreement in the health sector in particular. And I remember Dr. Muzwale at the time he was a minister. He echoed the same voice that as long as I'm a minister, there will be no minimum service level agreement. The thinking from government was that you do that because you're going to deter workers from, protest action. And they don't realize that actually that is deepening the problem. It is just creating a crisis that is unnecessary when there are regulatory mechanisms that it is where we can put a system to manage, as Dr. Letlapa is explaining. We can manage this thing. All we need is an agreement that will look at what ratios, depending on the staffing levels in each institution, per category of employees. You look at the nurses, you look at the the cleaners, you look at all the categories of employees in the hospital, and then you say, so this is the minimum that we're going to agree on this one because of the service we render. But it's sheer arrogance from our government, a government that is not caring, and at the same time they pay lip service claim to be caring. I mean, Dr. Labes put it correctly. At the heart of COVID in 2020, they decided not to pay these frontline workers when they were in service. When all of us were locked in our homes, the health care workers, they were in hospitals. They were traveling in taxis and buses, risking their lives, and some unfortunately perished during that period. All we had was nice words until today. We had to take the minister then to court for government to agree to discuss seriously the issue of protective clothing for healthcare workers, because they were in denial even at that time. It is not surprising that we have these scandals of money that the SIU is investigating. It's because we have a leadership problem here at the top, but also in many of our health institutions. If, for instance, I'm a CEO, even if there's no minimum civil agreement at the national level, but I'm confronted with a situation where the leadership of the union says, look, this situation, this strike is unpreventable, but can we agree to manage the situation in the hospital? I will not refuse, because I have a responsibility in that institution to make sure that I protect the poor, I protect the vulnerable, so that their rights, are protected. They receive the kind of service they require. But to dismiss people, to arrogantly so because somebody has told you so, it's really irresponsible on the side of the employer. And I can't agree more with Dr. Lejabe. It's about time this matter, perhaps the courts themselves, who are making these rulings and interdict, needs to help us to really direct the Department of Health, direct the DPSA, that you're going to do this because it's a requirement by law.
That's on the service level agreement. On the wage deal, the Minister of Finance is arguing that he actually agrees with the workers that there needs to be more workers, but money has to come from somewhere, and they can only be able to give so much given the competing priorities. But if they were to give you the 10% that you want, it would mean that there would be no money to hire new police officers, new teachers, new nurses, and so on and so forth. It is precisely because they are listening to your cry of being overstretched and perhaps overburdened, that they need the money you want for an increment to actually hire other public servants.
Vuyo, let's be honest. Maybe you can show me where they are hiring more nurses, where they are hiring more doctors, where they are hiring more police, teachers, and so forth. I mean, a month ago, Samatu, the union, they protested in the National Department of Health for employment of more doctors, and there are doctors out there who are not employed. As things stand, since 2015, when government started to implement this austerity budget, and actually, it was intensified in 2019 when Minister Tito Mboweni announced the new waves of wage freezes and austerity measures. We're sitting currently, in terms of the recent available information from DPSA, with 165,000 vacant positions in the public service. So tell me, where are they hiring those people? I mean, in 2020, they did not pay a salary increase. In 2021, they decided to give them a gratuity of 1,000 rand. and last year they give the 3%. 3% in a year when inflation was at its highest in 13 years at 7.8%. When actually from 2020 we have not been given in the salary increase. So where did that money go if we still have such vacancies? We call this war on the public service and public servants. It is butchering of the public service by this government. The austerity is about cut in spending or baseline spending of the budgets of departments. Health has been a casualty. Education has suffered. It's only recently that the minister announces additional employment of about 10,000 police. Staggered, but that's not true.
Dr. Itape, we've been told over the years that this NHI idea has been in the making, that it is how we'll be able to address health apartheid. That it will go very far in addressing the issue of the poorest having to rely on underfunded and overcrowded public hospitals.
That's a difficult one, because we could speak about that for the rest of the evening. But I'll just come up with a few basic things. If it's national, it has to be for all of us. You remember I spoke to you about separating the rich from the poor. It can't be a low-cost medical scheme. It has to be putting all health funding under one piece of legislation. You can't continue to have a Medical Schemes Act, which is for the privileged and the rich, and you're now coming with an NHI, which is for the poor. You're still having two separate systems, and the same problems are going to continue.
So it is not the solution?
It is a solution, but it has to be properly done. It has to be a common pot for all of us. You, me, should be paying into the same pot with Judge Zondo and President Ramaphosa and Minister Motsoaledi and Mr. Mavuzo. It should be one scheme, and we should be subsidizing Gogo Dlamini and our cousin, so that it's one system for all of us. That's the first thing. If there's no courage to make a national health system, people should say, we don't have the courage to fix healthcare. Let's wait until we have a courageous government. Because if it is separate, it is not national. You're creating a new pot for skinny jeans. No matter what you say, if you don't address the separateness, and I always sit there and I say, I have colleagues that have been in the struggle. What were they struggling for? Were they struggling for the elite to be admitted into a white world, or were we struggling to give a more human face to South Africa, as Steve Biko says? I'm not too sure. We fail in basics. We still have not been able to give our country a new name. It's still the same South Africa of Foster in a name. Basic things. So there are some things where, as long as me and you, as African people, don't lose our self-hate and don't treat our siblings, our relatives as others, South Africa will not come right. The second issue is about procurement. If you listen to what Mr. Mavuso is saying, if you look at our health system right now, where there's a lot of wastage is on procurement. I mean, you have managers that don't even have the authority to buy a pencil. They got to go through three tenders. He can't just go to Macro and buy a pencil cheap. He's got to wait for a pencil that costs 10 times or 100 times what it would cost to have a pencil. So there are a lot of money that's wasted in procurement. Unless we restructure those issues and you get your healthcare system to be a price fixer, not a price taker, because it's national, because it's working for everybody, it'll never come right. So if it is going to be national, it has to be for all of us. If it is not for all of us, it's a non-starter. And this business of saying, oh, we're helping the poor come up, ain't gonna happen. Ain't gonna happen. So I support NHI, but NHI has to be national, one minister, a health ministry that is run nationally, and a fund that is for all of us, that all of us contribute to. If you come up with pots for then you got a disaster that you are creating. I mean, we have medical schemes, you have council for medical schemes, and now we employ new people inside the department on a competency that exists. We're not bringing things together. That, the way it is being implemented, I am seriously concerned. If it is not for all of us, it is for none of us.
We'll come back.
And just before we go, I think one of the issues, my appeal to Mr. Mavuso is that I would like to see the union leaders lead so that the strike is peaceful and there's no intimidation. We don't need court orders for us to be civil and to do things properly. And that's the minimum that we expect from them. Yeah. So that amongst the members in their union, they should be ensuring that there's enough staff for the essential services to continue without intimidation. They will then enjoy the support of all South Africans. But to the ministry, we need a minimum level service agreement yesterday. I've been saying the same thing from 2001 when I was Chair of SAMA. And we need responsibility from both sides. And to those that are risking their lives, we will always be grateful to them. But we need to support them. There's no need for a person that wants to save people's lives to endanger their own by wanting to do good.
I thank both of you. Dr. Litlape, Mr. Mavuso, thanks to both of you for agreeing to come on the program this evening. After the break, another Metro mayor bites the dust. The ANC tells us why it has decided to recall Buffalo City's mayor. Now, opposition parties in the Buffalo City Metro say the decision by the ANC to recall the mayor, Ola Pagati, comes as no surprise. They have criticized his leadership, saying he struggled to deal with service delivery-related challenges in that metro. The metro is the only one governed outright by the ANC. Well, we were expecting a representative of the ANC to join us. They've been giving us a bit of a run around. It looks like they are not keen to talk about this at all. But our reporter, Abongile Yanjes, has filed this report.
The ANC cites poor audit outcomes, the failure to collect revenue and wasteful expenditure as some of the reasons for the axing. He served 7 years at the helm.
Thorough internal organizational consultation process has been followed and the affected employee has been informed. And in fact, the decision has been taken after due consideration and assessment by the PWC of the ANC on the performance of the Metropolitan Municipality. And most importantly, the ANC's approach to this matter has all times been informed by the interest of the broader community of Buffalo City.
Opposition parties say internal party squabbles are behind the poor performance of this metro.
The recalling of Kola Pakati does not come as any surprise to the opposition because we've been aware of such intense internal battles in terms of ANC politics since Princess Faku replaced Kola Pakati as the chairperson of the Khubusana region. So it was a matter of when, not if it was going to happen.
It's a blessing in disguise for the removal of Kola Pakati. But however, there's nothing that is going to change because the ANC is still in power here in Buffalo City. Kola Pakati was not only the problem to this community of Buffalo City. It's the ANC that is the problem. The sooner our people removes the ANC from power in Buffalo City, the better.
It is not just opposition parties pointing to intra-party tensions.
We must remember that the outgone mayor never supported the incumbent, the premier or the chairperson of the ANC in the province. He aligned himself with Babalo Madikizel. So I think that might be the reason why he has been in conflict with the current leadership of the province and also the regional leadership of the ANC.
Organized businesses hopes a new mayor will be elected soon.
It will definitely have an effect, you know, because whenever there's a recollection of a head, a political head, an administrative head, it sets progress back a bit, you know, so there'll definitely be some interruption for a while. Hopefully, we're hoping that the ANC will act speedily, you know, with the replacement. So that we can continue the working relationships and whatever we were working on together before as well.
3 names have been submitted to the party's National Working Committee for his successor, which include the Deputy Mayor, Princess Faku. She is also the ANC's regional chairperson. Abungile Yankees, SABC News, East London.
As I said earlier, the ANC has dropped us a couple of times today. That invitation, of course, still stands. It looks like there's more to this story than meets the eye. Hopefully, an official will eventually come and explain some of the things that are unclear at this stage. But let's go to another metro in the capital city now. The Independent Electoral Commission has confirmed that it has been officially notified of a proportional representative councillor vacancy in the Tshwane municipality. Tshwane City Manager Johan Metler informed the Commission of the development. New Tshwane Mayor Dr. Murunwa Makwarela did not last long. He has been disqualified as a proportional representative a week after taking office. Dr. Makwarela has failed to provide proof to the city manager that he has been rehabilitated after being declared insolvent in 2016. The capital city is again leaderless and in political turmoil. And joining me now to discuss this is Professor Jaap de Visser, who is a multi-level government acting research chair at the Dalla Omar Institute. Good evening, Prof. Thanks very much for your time. The mystery for many people here, you know, around this story is the fact that this person you know, was allowed to be the speaker of this council, and then only a few days later, he suddenly, you know, doesn't deserve to be the mayor of this council and city.
Yeah, good evening for you, and good to be with you. So the problem here arose before Dr. Makwarela was elected as a councillor. He, I think, has been economical with the truth when he signed up to be nominated as a candidate. Because when he was nominated as a candidate, he was asked to clarify to the IEC and to the political party that fielded him whether or not he was an unrehabilitated insolvent, because that is a requirement. You cannot be an insolvent and be a member of a municipal council or a member of parliament for that matter. So when you get fielded as a candidate, you have to indicate that. So clearly he then indicated that he is not, and was duly then fielded by COPE as a candidate and declared elected as a member of the council. And actually, that was never supposed to have happened, because he was from the get-go disqualified by the law to be a member of the council. So it's not a matter of him being disqualified now by the city manager or anyone. This is something that was already the case upon his nomination and subsequent election.
So do we know for a fact, Prof, that he either willfully withheld information, or whether it was a question of him not being aware that he had to provide that information or that kind of information as well?
Yeah, I think we should not make it more complicated than it is. It's quite a straightforward matter. Either you are insolvent or you're not. You are declared insolvent by a court, and it's that same court that can lift that insolvency by a court order, or the insolvency, disappears after a certain time. I think it's 10 years. So it's those two ways in which an insolvency can end. So when you have to answer a question on a form, whether you're insolvent or not, it's quite a straightforward issue. It's like someone asking someone whether they're pregnant or not. The answer is yes or no. There isn't sort of a comfortable gray area in between. So this should be a very straightforward matter for Dr. Makwarela to have resolved from the get-go. If either he must provide evidence that he was declared solvent again by the court, and if not, then there's a court order that stands that declares him insolvent. So.
But what I'm trying to get at, Prof, is whether...
It's a straightforward issue in law, and I think we should be very careful to read more into this or attribute shenanigans to the city manager of sorts, because the city manager does not have a choice. The moment that the city manager becomes aware of a vacancy in the council, he or she is compelled by law to declare a vacancy. He doesn't have a choice. It's not a matter of discretion.
But what I was trying to establish, Prof, is whether we know or anyone has provided any evidence or proof that one, he was made aware that you cannot be a councillor if you don't if you were insolvent, and this was made clear to him, but he then went out of his way to either conceal or lie, in which case then he would be held personally liable. Much as that may be the law, but if for argument's sake he was not aware, then he does, I think, have a leg to stand on somewhat.
No, I have a different view. I don't think he has. The law is very clear. The Constitution itself provides this. So, and I think we're all expected to know the law. And this is quite a straightforward issue. It's a question on a form, and also the political party that fielded him has obviously a responsibility to vet its candidates.
And that was my that was going to be my next question, Prof, whether the political party that it belongs to is perhaps one or someone there slept on the job, so to speak. Could that be the case? What responsibility, did his party have to ensure that he met all the set legal and other criteria?
Absolutely. This is a huge embarrassment for COPE. Because COPE fielded a candidate of which it was uncertain whether or not that candidate met the absolute basic and minimum requirements to be a councillor that are listed in the Constitution, together with issues such as you can't have a criminal record, etc. So those are very basic issues. And I think this points, for me, to the weakness of small political parties and the huge risk that our politicians are taking when they allow these very small political parties with minor representation in council and very clearly mediocre internal systems to be propelled to these very, very important positions in the council through, botched coalition negotiations. That's just my own view. I don't think it's a good idea that we have these very tiny political parties in these major roles in the council, because it's a huge risk, as is shown today again.
Well, one wonders actually how many of these kinds of, problems may be there because, or may still be there, or how many people may well fall into this category, but their respective political parties have not actually done what they ought to have done. What about the IEC, Prof? Do they just accept what the parties and candidates tell them, or are they not obliged for their part to actually make sure that the information that they are given is in fact accurate?
Well, you see, I think it starts with, obviously, as we discussed, the candidate must be honest when he or she submits him or herself to that process. The party must also do its bit in vetting the candidate. Then what the IEC does, the IEC in principle takes on goes on what the form and what the information indicates and publishes the party list. So also the public has an opportunity before the elections to look at the party list and say, well, hey, we know this person, and this person actually is insolvent because he or she owes me money. We're still sorting out the bankruptcy, for example. So there are those processes, but I think it's unreasonable to expect of the IEC to vet each of the almost 100,000 candidates that get submitted through party list and ward nominations in election, because that would be an impossible task for the IEC, because we don't have systems in place where the IEC can, with one, Google search on one hit on the button, verify whether someone is still insolvent or not. That would almost require, you have to appoint a private detective to figure out what's happening. So clearly the IEC cannot do that for almost 100,000 candidates.
Prof, thank you so much for that clarity and those insights. Professor Yap Defeser, who is, of course, based at the Dala Omar Institute. Well, that means, of course, that for now at least, the Tshwane Metro still does not have a mayor. That brings us to the end of tonight's show. To join us again tomorrow evening, same time. Have a good night.